uncover, explore, activate. With intention and availability, no expectations. Get ready to unleash with Kelly and Bree. Bare soul knowing.
Hey, and welcome back to another episode of our creative project, Unleash. My name's Kelly.
And I'm Bree.
And today we're thrilled to be joined by David Norsworthy, who is a very old friend of both of ours, who we know through the dance community. And we're going to tackle the topics of play, pleasure, and rest, which are very near and dear to our hearts and our systems right now. And actually the conversation went somewhere that we had no idea it was going to go. So we really hope you enjoy.
We first just want to say thank you for hopping on with us and welcome to Unleash.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm just so happy to reconnect with both of you. So this could be fun.
This is the experiment of why we're calling it a creative project.
Mm-hmm.
Because we really, as we were just speaking to David pre-recording and talking about setting up some kind of roadmap, but the whole idea behind, and specifically this episode too, is kind of letting the moment lead us and really feeling into what it needs, which is pretty terrifying for potentially people that are happy to perform and to know where they're headed. Thanks for jumping off a baby / huge cliff with us today. But I'll just say that part of the reason why I felt called to invite David to this episode specifically is because of the conversations you and I have had around these ideas of rest, pleasure, play, and the multi-dimensional layers to those things. And so if you could just start and maybe tell us where you are right now, how you've been spending some of your COVID time, anything you feel called to share, and then perhaps just a little segue into when you started to investigate those ideas for yourself in your own personal practice.
And if I'll add, ready? Are you taking notes?
Right. I'm like, just give us a list of all of that. I was
going to say, maybe before, just if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself a little bit and sharing any part of your past journey or who David is and anything that you want to share with us. Because we know you, obviously, but the people following along on our journey don't necessarily know who you are.
Totally.
I'm just noticing in myself that when you are asking the question, like, just like, who are you? I'm like, I feel my heart beating. Like that question is like holds so much depth and resonates really deep. So my name is David Norsworthy, and I am learning how to rest. I should say that I think before I even get into anything, I want to just mention that I'm a total novice, like a total rookie when it comes to rest and pleasure and play. And I think that my obsession with it right now is a kind of beginner's curiosity. So now that that's out of the way, I'm not speaking from a place of expertise. I'm speaking from a place of I don't know, infantile ignorance almost.
I liked what you did use the word curiosity though, which I like. And that's what a lot of this is for us, is even in us doing this and a lot of the things that we talk about, we can only talk about it where we are in the journey with it in that exact moment. In a year down the road, we'll have more knowledge, but we don't know that yet. So there's no pressure, or at least we try not to put pressure on ourselves to like have all the answers and be the expert and be the voice that people look up to for all the answers, because we don't have that either. So we're excited to engage in this conversation with you as someone who is curious and is starting to dip their toes in this world that we are even probably more infantile in our curiosity than you are. So it's a cool way for us to just all kind of swim around in it and explore together.
I mean, okay, now we're already in the thick of it. I'll get to your other questions, I promise. But I'm thinking about my word choice of like infantile to describe where I'm at with pleasure, rest, and play, and how that word, like, I don't know, speaks to a time when we were newborns, kind of, and actually how there is so much curiosity kind of that's naturally inside of us at that stage of our lives. And yeah, which I think just builds on what you were offering, Bree, which creates this kind of weird paradox in my head that I don't know how to deal with, like that maybe infantile ignorance is actually the expert of like I don't know, because we go through our lives and we forget, and we're taught to not value pleasure, play, and rest. And I'm talking specifically about systems like patriarchy and white supremacy and colonialism and capitalism. I'm talking about, the way that we're conditioned to be productive workers in a workforce that is not for our benefit. And so I'm thinking about how these layers and complications are added on over time through training and education, or what we would call education, but might not actually truly be education. And so maybe, this whole process of practicing pleasure, rest, and play is, maybe as soon as you feel like you're the expert at it, you're not actually doing it anyways. And I was using, infantile ignorance as a term to explain or to apologize for my own, feeling of struggling with pleasure, rest, and play, like as if to say I don't have. I'm actually not very good at it, is what I'm saying when I'm calling myself infantilely ignorant around what it means to rest and find pleasure. Where am I going with this?
Well, I think what's coming up when I'm hearing you talking is that we have been conditioned away from these ideas, or that we've tried to define them in this binary: you are resting or you're not. You are in pleasure or it's not fun. And it is a symptom of how we've grown up and the systems we've grown up in that you're speaking to, that this is now the residual. And we're all sort of, not all, but the three of us, I think, are trying to unlearn some of those really restrictive beliefs. And in that, we are becoming the playful infants that never had to try to be playful when we were toddlers. Oh, it's like also taking a little look back into that inner child type of playfulness. Who was I as a little David, as a little Kelly? How would they play together, and giving ourselves permission, which is the hardest part, because even in this moment we spoke about, and it can just be a playful episode and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't know how to do that without feeling pressure, or there is a sense of manufacture. Okay, let me get my blanket and and this has to be my physicality if I'm being playful. So it's like, I don't know if anything's coming up for you.
It just comes back to that idea of, like, am I doing this right? Am I being playful enough in the right way? Am I resting right? And if we are talking about toddlers and infants and children, like, that idea hasn't been drilled into the mind yet. They're tired. They're going to nap in the car, on the couch, in the playground, on the grass. Right now, they're like, I'm tired. The end. There is, well, you should be doing this, and what about that? And it's like, I feel like drawing in chalk, and I don't care that it's 6 a.m. I'm gonna draw chalk on the sidewalk, and they're just like following those instincts so clearly. Whereas with us, most adults, there's like so many barriers around being able to just free flow with those instincts. And it's like, I feel this, like, well, I shouldn't. So, okay, I'm not going to. How dare I have a nap at 11 a.m. even if I had a crazy week or, you know what I mean? It's like, no, I just woke up. Absolutely not. I'll nap once I have everything done on my to-do list.
Deserving rest, deserving pleasure. Once we've put in the work is a huge story I'm trying to play with, trying to dance with. Has quarantine or COVID affected or maybe exasperated some of how you're feeling about these ideas? I'm just curious.
I remember when lockdown first hit in March 2020. I remember sleeping in the next day and thinking to myself, how would I have continued? Like, I remember, then sleeping in again the next day and being like, oh God, I needed this so much. And really, questioning the trajectory that I had been on before, and honestly not being in retrospect kind of dumbfounded that I had been operating at such a high intensity and well beyond my capacity, I think. So I mean, but rest requires a kind of feeling of safety. And when you're talking, Kelly, about, wanting to finish all these things, to deserve rest, what I'm hearing is that there are, certain, aspects or elements of your life that you need to take care of before you feel maybe stable enough or safe enough to be like, you know what? Yeah, things are under control. Like, I'm not letting things spiral out of control to the place where they would be, unsafe for me. Like, my career trajectory would fall off the rails, or I, didn't pay my bills on time, or like whatever it is that's on your to-do list. I feel like all of those things kind of, they emerge out of real needs that we have. And so the kind of weird dilemma of the pandemic was that we had all of this time to rest, but without the feeling of safety and stability that comes along, that is necessary for restful. And so I think, I want to expand a little bit on what you were saying, Kelly, around deserving rest. And I utterly and wholeheartedly feel that rest is a right that we all have, and that we don't need to work to earn our right to rest. And yet, we live in a world where rest is also a privilege. And so for those of us who wield certain kinds of privilege, be it white privilege or, privilege that comes with coming from a family of a certain socioeconomic status, or the privilege of being neurotypical or able-bodied or cis or whatever it happens to be. The privileges and the intersectionalities of those privileges that we hold in our body give us greater or less access to rest. And so for those of us who hold more of those privileges, or a larger, accumulation of that within our bodies and our history, then I do begin to question whether we need to earn it. Like, who am I to rest in my privilege? Who am I to rest in my privilege so easily and on a whim? So I think, this is a larger conversation around, the responsibility of labor to dismantle oppressive systems. That, if we make progress on that, then maybe rest and pleasure and play could be more accessible for everyone, which it's not at the moment. So I guess I'm interested in that conversation that holds the complexity of all of that.
It's wild because there is the individual rest, pleasure, play, where you can look at it like as the microcosm of like you and you alone and your being. And I find for the two of us especially, like those are a lot of self-imposed limits to the rest, pleasure, and play. And then there's the bigger picture of rest, pleasure, and play on a global scale, and all of the barriers to that, exactly kind of what you were saying. And it's like, it can get overwhelming. Yeah, it's ugh.
Yeah, it's a conundrum. It is such a conundrum, and I'm grateful for your reflection on that, David, because I think we're both having a bit of a moment right now. When I deny my humanness for its like very simple needs, and again, that lives within my privilege, because are my needs that I'm fighting for a roof over my head and I don't have enough to eat, and no, but does my specific system, as a very empathic, squishy, sensitive, like really susceptible being, can I show up in service of humanity and the world I want to help heal and make a better place? Can I do that if I'm denying the needs and fighting against? And I feel like my system was stuck in that fight or flight of not listening to the intuitive self-care, self-love that my body was crying for, my soul, my heart. So I actually couldn't fully be available to do the kind of work, and I hate to call it work, but research, committed curiosity to heal these oppressive systems, because I was half a person. I was half a soul. I was this like ghost of a vessel that was like, I do the thing because, and honestly, most of it was because I wanted to be validated. I wanted to feel loved, and I was fighting to be seen, which wasn't in alignment with like who I know I can be and how I can show up. I just got like so, can you feel my energy? I was like, whoa, cool. I didn't think that this would bring up any kind of like, it's frustration. It's I'm like in a bit of a shame bubble right now, which is cool. To just be able to be transparent with you guys. Yeah, you people, you beautiful people.
Yeah, there's a lot here. I mean, I think I also want to say that, most of what I've learned about rest, pleasure, and play has been through the eloquence and generosity of POC femmes. Like, I haven't learned a lot about rest, pleasure, and play from the people who have the most access to it, which I think is inspiring and worth acknowledging. Yeah, like when I first started working with a mentor, she's a mentor, she's a friend. I don't know if she thinks that she's a mentor for me, but I've certainly learned a lot from her. Someone named Su-Feh Lee. They are a choreographer that works in Vancouver, and their whole practice centers around pleasure and yielding around obstacles. And Su-Feh was a dramaturg, like an outside eye kind of like, mentor for a piece that I was making in 2018. And I remember when Su-Feh first brought the word pleasure into our conversation, especially around the work that I was making, which is, around Asian identity. I remember feeling like it was such a dirty word, like that pleasure was thing, like it was a word that belonged in the bedroom, and and so then I was really like, I like didn't even have any hobbies at the time. I did not have any hobbies. So like this question around pleasure was really like, I don't know, I work.
Yeah.
We have had this conversation so many times.
I mean, and so Su-Feh is one of those people who has, through working with her and conversations with her, has totally transformed my pleasure practice and my body. I'm also reading a wonderful book right now called Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Brown, which is highly recommended, which I would highly recommend. There's also like some beautiful talks online, like one by, I forget her name, Shauna Dalton-Smith. It's around the 7 types of rest. I don't know if you've seen it, but also this is like, was hugely revolutionary for me. And Tricia Hersey, who's the Nap Bishop. I don't know if you've seen her stuff on Instagram, but she's the Nap Bishop, and she does all of these really cool performances and talks around rest as resistance. And so, I think I bring those people into the conversation to amplify their work and to honor their work, and to say everyone who's watching this should go look up all of those folks. And I mean, I think it's some ways out of necessity. Like, the less access you have to pleasure, play, and rest, the more that you're going to pioneer new ways to bring it into your life. Like, you're maybe pushed to challenged to, I don't even know how to phrase this, but like, manifest or summon what is so lacking or unavailable to you. I was just curious to know if either of you had encountered any of those resources that
I think I recently saw something about the 7 types of rest.
Me too. Yeah.
I think
we probably exchanged that name. Yeah.
But that's the only one that you mentioned that I had heard. And we'll add all of those in the show notes as well, so that there's very quick and easy access to them for anyone who's watching this and listening. And then, like, after we're done recording this, I definitely want to check all of those out. I'm
very intrigued by pleasure activism.
Yeah.
And in the past, you were reading a book, David, that we spoke about at the beginning of COVID, and it was just pleasure?
Yeah, this one. Okay, well, this one comes with like a caveat. This book was written by a white man in the like 60s or 70s, so there are things about it that are quite problematic. And yet ideas also that are quite revolutionary, I would say. This guy, his name is Alexander Lowen. And this is really like, this book is really about the chemistry of pleasure in our body, like what's happening on a physiological level when we're in pleasure. Talks about like breath being the like foundational source of pleasure.
Yeah.
Because breath is movement, and movement is life, because the opposite of movement is stillness, which is death. So breath, he hypothesizes, is the groundwork. And I'm noticing now that I'm not breathing very well.
I was just gonna say,
I just put my hand to my stomach.
You just brought us all into our bodies, I think, with referencing that.
Yeah.
And what's also coming up for me too is how much I struggle with breath in my own dance practices and movement practices. And that's why I've sort of taken a dive into the world of voice work and breath work, and Bree and I both do. And how ironically there is so much resistance to the breath that potentially could lead to pleasure. Surrender, release, admittance, yielding. And yet I want to work my way into breath that happens innately.
Can you say that one more time? I don't know if I understood.
That there is a knee-jerk reaction that when I'm doing breath work or specifically thinking about finding my voice, that I want to work hard to breathe properly to find this pleasure that if our breath, not if, our breath it happens automatically. And therefore, can we not automatically drop into pleasure? I certainly do not understand that.
Right. Well, another part of this book is like, I think that we romanticize pleasure in a way. I think in this book, he's also arguing that pleasure is the absence of pain. Which, we're experiencing more often than we would say that we were in pleasure, if we were to think of pleasure as only kind of like a positive thing. I mean, maybe that is like euphoria or joy or ecstasy, that like positive version of pleasure. But like there's a kind of pleasure that is the pleasure of being healthy, like the pleasure of just being like right in the middle. The pleasure of not being in pain. But we may not always call that pleasure.
Yeah, the phrase that just came to mind is like the simple pleasures. Like you hear that all the time, the simple pleasures. The idea of like this like beautiful, soft cotton spandex pant that I'm touching right now, or like we were just laying out in the grass and like the feeling of the cool, damp grass on your skin, and like, so literally so simple, and it's not mind-blowing or insanely euphoric necessarily, but there's such a soft, simple, easy pleasure in that especially in, the Western Hemisphere. I mean, in so many parts of the world, like those are skipped over and not acknowledged, and the amount of joy that those simple things can bring when we just take the time to think, feel, breathe, smell, touch, and how that instantly drops, at least I find, drops me into my body, brings me to my breath, makes me feel at one with everything, a small part of the greater, grander universe. And yeah, pleasure doesn't have to be massive. It can be small and subtle. Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah.
And
Yeah, like what if it was already there? And what if you didn't have to try?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, sorry, go Kelly.
I think you perfectly packaged what I was trying to express in saying that I try to work for my breath to get to a place. Like, what if there was nowhere to get and we didn't have to try? And with that brings up words like presence, gratitude, these sort of,
kind of like
it words.
Yes, yeah. Trendy words right now.
Yeah, like trendy words that, I did not understand what gratitude, like I made gratitude lists, I got journals for most of my life, and I did not actually connect to what that was. And that I don't know if it was the language or the trendiness of it, totally desensitized to it. But in the way that we are thinking about it right now, those are the moments that I'm able to find the most gratitude, especially right now in this time in the world.
I'm just I'm
feeling pleasurable.
I was just looking at this rug here and I was like, oh my God, that blue is so vibrant and full. And I'm like feeling like a little teary right now.
I'm feeling equally uncomfortable and sweaty.
Yeah.
And seen.
Yeah.
And extremely grateful.
Yeah.
And being pulled into a moment of presence with you both right now through this dialogue.
There's another amazing thinker, Bayo Akomolafe is his name. And he says, the times are urgent, let us slow down. And, this is also the sentiment behind this writer, Jenny Odell's book, which is called How to Do Nothing. And again, both people of color. I'm like very inspired by this idea that the problem is the solution and the solution is the problem. Like as soon as we try to like search for pleasure or search for rest, we automatically disqualify ourselves from the race. Or we close the loop on the race so we never go anywhere. We're just going around in circles. So I guess part of the practice that I'm in is also finding pleasure, finding play, finding rest. In some of the things that maybe I've come to believe are the opposite of it, like how to reclaim or reframe my relationship to pleasure, play, and rest inside corners or nooks and crannies of my life where it, doesn't feel like it should belong. And I often think about, I don't know where I heard this first, but I'm embarrassed to say it was probably on Instagram from someone anonymous. I don't know. I apologize that I can't credit this to anyone, but I saw somewhere that self-care is empathy with your future self. And this is really cool to me because it kind of like bridges us across time in a way. Like it means that, something that I'm investing in right now could be pleasurable for the mere fact that it will produce care or pleasure or rest or alignment later on. Like, yeah, I guess, because part of the problem with pleasure and play and rest is that we get fixated on the moment too. Like, you're talking about the present as a buzzword. Like, yeah, we're so like into this, like what's happening right now, this instantaneous, like I want it now. But I feel like there's a kind of patience if we think about the future, and a kind of reverence with the past that is important in pleasure and play and rest. That brings some ease into the moment when we're like hoping for it to happen like right now, or we want it to happen right now. But yeah, I think there are pleasurable ways that maybe feel like labor to set us up for a different kind of pleasure in the future.
It's interesting. The first thing that popped into my head when you say this, and this is such like a simple kind of thing, but like as a dancer who's injured 24/7, like I have a rehabilitative Pilates sequences that I should be doing every day in order to be injury free and reduce my pain. And every day it's, I gotta do my Pilates. I gotta do my Pilates. Work, and it's this. But I know that when I do my Pilates, I feel good and I can walk through the day without pain and. And that is the perfect way that I never thought about it like that. But those 30 minutes that I do every morning is not a task or a chore. It is now a pleasurable experience that my future self gets to benefit from. And therefore, in the moment, it can also be pleasurable.
In the knowingness of what you will derive from that practice, there is pleasure in giving that to yourself.
Yeah.
Oof. It's so true. Yeah, I often have little phrases like, that's future Kelly's problem, or future self will thank me. Like, it's, there's the binary. It's either one or the other. Yeah. Like, I'm like, I'm not going to think about it. But again, there's, I don't know, sovereignty, self-governing in knowing, like, that there is choice, that sometimes you can invite or infuse something with pleasure because you have the satisfaction of knowing that there is a pain-free body coming to a theater near you.
Right.
And then I'm like, what's it dropping into me right now is like, how cerebral are we being with all of these body things? Like, which, I mean, I think is part of the fun for all of us.
Yeah, and it's, I think, how all of us, again, we're like either naturally work or are conditioned or all of that. It's like, this is the way in for us. This is how it starts, and then it drops down, and that's the beauty, and what we're all kind of exploring right now is the feeling and the experience and what comes out of it being embodied. But I feel like all three of us kind of start here, and then it courses through. So this maybe the cerebral way is kind of like how we get in.
Yeah. Or it's like, we kind of alert our minds to like the things to pay attention to, and so that way when we do feel something in our bodies, we can recognize it and we can name it. And it helps us, create patterns that might sustain that behavior in the long term. But I don't know, like my body has an intelligence. Okay, you know what? First, fuck this binary. My body is my brain and my brain is my body. Like, it is all one thing. And like, there's that too. And I don't know. My experience of it is that, okay, so I was playing catch the other day with my boyfriend, Noah. We were in the backyard and we were playing catch. And I was having a jolly good time. I'm awful at catching balls. and I have some sports related trauma, so it's hard for me to even look at the ball as it like comes towards me, and I had to remind myself, like, you have to watch the ball in order for you to catch it. Like, you can't look away at the moment of impact, which I think is packed with a lot of metaphors that we don't have to get into right now. But where am I going with this? Yeah, so the next day, I was like, I don't know, I had really practiced catching the ball in that first like afternoon outside, and I had like come up with these like different strategies, very brainy, right? For like, okay, how gay David is gonna catch this ball. But the second day I went out, and there was something a little bit off with my stomach. Like, my digestion was just not right that day. And none of my strategies worked. None of my strategies worked because my gut was not on board. My gut was like, yo, something's wrong. You need to lie down maybe, and so none of these like intellectual things, like I just couldn't get the systems to cooperate. And I think it was because I didn't have access to my instincts. Like, instincts literally live in my gut, so the kind of like quick fire, rapid response that I needed to like, do this weird hand-eye coordination thing and match that up with like, look at the ball, close your fingers, like this weird, like, I don't know, very quick process that happens all in a moment in time when you're trying to catch a ball. I wasn't able to like put my brain's intelligence into that because my body was just so not present. And it was way less pleasurable that day. Like I couldn't think myself into having fun.
The thing that makes me think of is like this idea of listening to your body. Because if you had listened to your body and your gut spoke to you and said, just have a lie down this afternoon instead of going out, there wouldn't have been that push up against, well, I want this to be fun, but it's not fun. And why is it not fun? It's because maybe that's not what you need today. And that was fun yesterday, but yesterday is not the same as today. And then that idea of like listening to your, like how tied that is into rest as well. Because usually, at least I find with us, when we don't listen to our body is when it's begging for rest, but we go, no, I want to do this, 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 and rest is not incorporated in any of that. And like we have gut stuff big time, and that's a major indicator for us when something is off or there's anxiety or stress or we're heading in a direction that isn't right. And we've now learned to listen to that. But it's fascinating how something, as simple as like some digestive gut stuff turns your system off, and therefore it cannot function at its full capacity in a situation where you are doing physical tasks. Whereas if you had just had an hour lie down and then gone and done it, you could have both listened to your body, given yourself the rest that you needed, and potentially gone into a beautiful, pleasurable afternoon backyard catch hang. And it's like such a simple answer. But it's like there's something about our systems that, I don't know.
Well, yeah, and what's coming up for me is I can just relate it to my dance practice or dance as my job and my work is you don't have the ability to have a bad gut day because you have to get on stage and wear the costume and do the thing and da-da-da. So where's the both and? Like, I think there's beautiful research in recognizing when we ignore and what the pushback is, but then how do we integrate? How do we, I can't lie down and rest because I have to be on stage in 20 minutes. I'm hearing this. And so my thinking body just wants to go be in a different place, or I need to, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but is anybody on board with me? It's like it's how do we integrate it into like the work-life balance, for another cliche kind of wording?
But it's, how do you feel that way and not go, hold on, I need to lock myself in a room for 3 hours? Like, how do you still function as a social human being who does have tasks, work, requirement, etc. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, but some of the things that are coming up for me are like, one, you like to take Kelly's situation, like, yeah, go on stage and be okay with it not being your best performance. You know, like, that is fine. Not everything has to be or we don't have to, I don't know. We don't have to feel good always. Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
I don't think we have to feel good always. That's not the point. And we don't have to be performing at our best always, because then best would be meaningless. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is, I don't want to live in a system where I have to sacrifice my well-being. I thought that was a more complete sentence, but it actually ends there. I don't want to live in a system where I have to sacrifice my well-being, period. And so to me, I'm like, I don't know, this idea of the show must go on, I think derives from colonial capitalist mindsets of theater and performance. So maybe the show must go on is not a useful mantra for us anymore. Maybe a more useful mantra might be like, the show must honor the people involved, or something like that. Like, and then how would we need to reorganize the way that we work to really make that true? I don't know. But I did want to tell you this story. It's not a very good story, but about a month ago, or was it 2 months ago, recently, someone asked me to be, I was supposed to teach this workshop, and then they wanted me to like participate in a staff meeting, like to talk about the workshop, essentially. But the staff meeting was going to happen on a Sunday. And I was totally available. I was absolutely available. But instead of saying yes, I said, I won't be able to be there because actually I don't work on Sundays. And that was one of the first times that I was really able to say out loud, like to make a kind of boundary for myself, and to protect that boundary in a way that, you know, wasn't defensive or rude. It was just totally true. And they didn't ask me about like when would be, you know, a good time for me to do the staff meeting. It was just like, this is when it is. So then my response was just, I'm sorry, I can't be there because I don't work on Sundays. Full stop. And there was so much pleasure in that.
I'm celebrating you so much right now. Boundary and no are dirty words sometimes, or feel like dirty words. And holy, I'm thrilled for you. That's amazing.
And what a beautiful, like you said it, there was pleasure in that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not somewhere that you would expect to find pleasure, is saying, I don't work on Sundays. And just like how open and expansive that probably made you feel, and left so much room for play and rest and. And it's just like, what a cool place. Like you were talking about the little corners that you can find pleasure in that are unexpected. And that is a beautiful example of one.
And I mean, to set that boundary, that I mean, I'm sitting on so much privilege being able to set that boundary. And I think that like, it's important for me to be clear about that. Like I was really confident in the value that I was bringing to that employer, enough to say, you know, I'm not going to bow to your every wish and command, essentially. Like I really had to like feel my sense of value in that space. And I think often in dance, we don't actually have that sense of like kind of being irreplaceable, or that sense of being like, you know, contributing to something, and that contribution being respected enough that we have negotiating power. So like for you, Kelly, I'm wondering like, yeah, your stomach's off. Maybe it's off a little bit more than you think you can handle. Like, what are the circumstances that you need to be able to be like, the best thing for my body? Or if I prioritize my pleasure, this, like, how would that situation unfold if you were to prioritize your pleasure?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting because I think you hit the nail on the head when you identified that in order to feel good and find pleasure in enacting a boundary, there has to be a true feeling of worth behind it. How does the no feel good? How does the this is what my system needs to access the pleasure? Because until 2 minutes ago, no, until very recently, saying no felt so uncomfortable that I would rather abandon myself and sacrifice my need to appease the others, to satisfy my codependency, because I'm not comfortable if you're not comfortable. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's exactly that. And that's the practice. That is a pleasure practice, actually, to know myself, to own my worth, to understand what I have to offer, to be grounded in that knowingness so that I can hold the boundary in truth. Because there's a fake way to feel like you're good enough.
Yeah.
And then it still doesn't lead you to pleasure. It leads you to imposter syndrome, which is really uncomfortable. But it's such a cool offshoot that we've found through this conversation. And I just really want to hear you say again, what if it's not the show must go on? The show must honor. Do you remember how you phrased it? The show must honor the people involved?
Something like that, yeah. That was beautiful, though.
Yeah. I almost feel like that's kind of a beautiful place to close things.
Yeah. If there's anything else you feel like has come up that you want to share before we kind of sign off, please feel free to add it in.
Yeah, there is actually one more thing that I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
It's about my breath. And it's about your breath. And it's about dance training. Like, I think I just wanted to verbalize that, you know, like expectations around what bodies look like in space, change training practices. And so I'm really talking about like, what does core strength mean and what does core strength look like? And I think, you know, I'm invested in a practice of Pilates. Like I am maneuvering my way through this, but I recognize in myself that a kind of building of core strength is the antithesis of the softness that I need to breathe freely. And just as I'm saying this, I'm allowing my belly to really be expansive and round and soft, as opposed to holding it in like a dancer is told to. And when I do that, my breath can be fluffy and expressive and easeful in a way that is not always available to me because I am so conditioned into this certain way of holding my stomach. And so for other dancers who are listening to this, I don't know, I think we have a lot to rethink as a community around, like, I don't know, the problems are the solutions. Like, I don't know, in what ways is our like conditioning of core strength, restricting breath, which is limiting oxygen capacity, which is, I don't know, it's like creating all of these other kinds of issues for us. And I'm like, beginning to be an advocate for softness, or at least for practicing the other end of the spectrum, like letting your belly just be whatever it is.
Well, the beautiful thing about that is practicing having both ends of the spectrum. You can access the one when you need it. So when you're on stage doing an hour-long show, you need that core strength and you need to be able to access that. And when you're at home after a long day and you want to drop into your body, you need to be able to release. And there are uses for both. And if you're only exposed to and or practiced in the one, you aren't able to oscillate and flow between the two based on your needs in that moment. And that's the cool thing about, I feel like all of this experimenting we're doing is we are touching the extreme ends of all of these things so that we can just pick from whatever we need whenever we need it.
Yeah, and how also beautiful and challenging, I might say, is it to know that on stage or in rehearsal or in a dance class, I also could take a deep, full belly breath to access softness, to invite structure in a different moment. And I've worked with multiple practitioners that have different belief systems around the core, around the container of it. In Pilates, it is this corseted feeling. It is the four sides of your abdominals. And what was most amazing for me to understand was that your multifidus, which are in your back, are a part of your core. And so what if we don't need to collapse the whole system? What if we can open the front to engage and find something in the back? And how slight and nuanced that play is with our breath in our movement practices and in our rest. That's very, very interesting.
But fascinating. Brings us right back to kind of where we started this conversation around that book that you referenced. Was it Pleasure, where he talks about breath? Yeah. And it's funny how we found our way right back to it. There you go. So cool. Thank you so much. We had no idea where this conversation was going to go, and
Me neither.
It went in some really cool, interesting directions, and I think we all kind of discovered and found some, and that felt really almost restorative.
Yeah, and I'll just say that in speaking with you, David, and I always find this in our conversations, the allowance for space, really listening, receiving, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's resting, but there just is this time and this thoughtfulness to the pacing that I really appreciate in my conversations with you, and that I think was really different and just asked for a different type of energy from us. And I want to continue to integrate it into my own life even more, resting, receiving, giving myself permission to not like, because it's totally an insecurity and a control thing of like, I need to control, like, what did I do at the beginning of this conversation? Took the steering wheel and went, David, I need to drive the car because none of us know where we're going. And I gave you...
And then I didn't answer any of your questions.
Oh, amazing. Like, I was like, can I have your resume, your biography? Like, it's so cool. Like, we just literally undid all of it and was like, wow, So anyway, super grateful for the learning curve that is able to happen in real time through this type of beautiful conscious conversation.
Yeah, same. The pace, it's just how I talk, but I think when I'm doing that, I'm not only searching for the words that I can really stand behind, but I'm also searching for the feedback in my body that says, yeah, that's what you want to say. And it takes me some time to synthesize all of that. So I also realize that it takes some patience from people who are listening. So thanks for also, your patience and for the very generous space that you've been holding for this conversation. I feel very grateful to both of you.
So grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So wonderful. Thank you. And we'll talk to you soon.
Hugs to come.
Yes. Hopefully.
Oh my gosh, real actual hugs?
Hugs to come.
Holy fuck.
Yes. Amazing.
Right. Thank you so much.